Hello everyone, and welcome to Lasgun 101. Similar to my Krieg 101 video, this is the second iteration of my videos in regards to my Deathcore of Krieg cosplay. Much like Krieg 101, Lasgun 101 will show you a step-by-step guide of how I put together my very own Deathcore of Krieg Lucius pattern lasgun. Now, I understand that not all the tips and tricks in this tutorial or 101 video will be transferable, but a lot of the sort of ideas and a lot of the sort of things that I've put into this lasgun may click something in your head that makes you go, oh, I could do it like this, or I could do it like that. So the idea behind this is not for you to basically do exactly as I've done, but to sort of try and figure out a way for you to make your very own Deathcore of Krieg lasgun. Now, with that being said, I don't want you to feel that you can't use any of the tips and tricks in this. The whole point of this Krieg 101 is so that you can use and utilize a lot of the ideas that I've had when building my very own Deathcore of Krieg lasgun. Now, I do understand that not everybody owns a laser cutter, and I utilized mine quite heavily for this build, but I'm sure there'll be some tips and tricks in this video that you yourself can use when building your very own Deathcore of Krieg lasgun. So, let's begin. The Lucius pattern lasgun. The standard issue lasgun in service with the Regiment of Krieg is the Lucius pattern lasgun. Sometimes known as a Hellgun, this hotshot weapon's power pack operates at a higher charge than many other more common pattern lasguns used by the other Imperial Guard regiments. This gives the weapon more penetrating power but drains the power pack after only 25 shots. The weapon is single shot only and has a slower recharge rate than many of the other lasguns. However, it has been judged by the Krieg commanders that the additional stopping power of the Lucius pattern more than makes up for this. The barrel of the weapon is fitted with distinctive heatsink rings at the rear of the barrel to help dissipate the enormous additional heat this high-powered las weapon generates after sustained fire. The weapon's furniture and stock, foregrip and such, are typically made of synthetic wood, although metal variants are known. The Deathcore of Krieg Lucius pattern lasgun probably has to be my favourite of any lasgun type. Not the heavy lasguns or anything like that, I'm talking like your standard weapon. I know the Krieg are the only ones who use the Lucius pattern, but the Gaunts, for example, they have their own version, then you have the Imperial Guard who have their own version, and so on. I like the look of all of those, but I prefer, much prefer the Lucius pattern lasgun because of the way it looks, the additional heatsink bands that it has on it, the skull details that is on it. There's something about it that I prefer more than any other lasgun. The lasgun that you see on screen here on my workshop floor is my very own personal Deathcore of Krieg lasgun. This Lucius pattern lasgun has recently had a brand new barrel end on it, and I did that live on my Twitch stream. But this here is the most up-to-date version of my Deathcore of Krieg lasgun. Everything on it is pretty much done. I'm very happy with it. There's nothing I really want to change on it. I do have plans to build another one at some point, so stick around for that because I might do that at some point. I think that'll be really cool, and if I do build another one, I think I actually might do a full-length video of it that I'll be splitting up into multiple parts, because I don't want to do one long video. But I have a tendency of doing long single videos like I'll be doing with this one, but in terms of this build video for a lasgun, I'm probably going to do multiple different parts for it. So stick around for that if you guys really like that. Hit the subscribe button and you'll be able to get notifications of when I post a video. So let's get on to how I put this entire Krieg lasgun together from start to finish. So I started off by going to Google Images, and the first thing I did was type in Deathcore of Krieg lasgun. So many images, obviously, but I went through and sort of got 40 that I really liked from a bunch of different angles. This includes people's cosplay versions, their ones on Etsy that you could see. There are people selling some on Etsy. There's loads of images and stuff like that everywhere that you can find, even 3D printable files that you can spin around. They supply you with a 3D model that you can spin around on the website. I used a bunch of those to get different angles, and there were so many different versions, because so many people they'll do a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, they'll do a Lucius pattern one, but the way they designed theirs specifically is, their own personal way of doing it. Now, I've seen ones that are made entirely out of metal with real wood. I've seen some people do an entirely 3D printed one. I know quite recently Yanovich has made an entirely 3D printable one that you can print in several pieces and then attach together to make a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. It is absolutely fantastic. Me, on the other hand, as you guys know by now probably, I like to go for EVA foam. I'll use as much foam as I can, but obviously for something like this I used PVC pipes for the barrels and some metal rods for the internal supports. Now, with all these images I've been showing you, as you can probably tell, the Lucius pattern lasgun has a very distinct and very specific shape. Now, I took to Lightburn, my absolute favourite software for designing things. I used a bunch of these images as reference images, and I made myself an absolute bare bones, basic Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun sort of outline, if you will. So here, this is my original screenshot that I took, and what I did was, while building the Krieg Lasgun, and I'm really happy I did this all these years ago, I actually took a screenshot of almost every time I changed the file. So every time I updated it and changed the file a little bit, I took a screenshot, and there's a lot of screenshots. There's over 70. So with that being said, this is the first one. Now obviously I had no idea in terms of size and scale of like the physical prop, because at this time human scale props weren't really something I did. I always do Space Marine scale stuff, and I have like an equation down for that, where I know my Space Marine is 7'4", and I know what weaponry can go with him and what size those weapons can be without looking too small or way too big. So it's quite an interesting thing, but to do human scale props and stuff, I've always struggled a little bit with them. But now, thanks to Lightburn and having a really, really great group of friends, I'm able to sort of find out roughly what size their props are if they've built them, and then sort of scale that accordingly. Now, speaking of scale, the actual Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun that I built was pretty much exactly what I imagined a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun would be. When I'm stood up, I'm 6'2", and when I'm stood up and I've got my lasgun next to me, I feel like it's a good height. I don't feel it's too short, and I don't feel it's too long. But I do have to give a big shout out to my best friend, Ranger of Krieg Cosplay. He already built his Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun for his Grenadier, and he gave me the measurements for his, but then he also told me, I feel mine's a bit long, take a bit of this off, take a bit of that off, add this, and I asked him for the thicknesses, and he said, it's about this wide, but take this much off it, because I wish I had taken this much off it when I was building mine, because obviously when he built his, he was also very new into cosplay. So with me being very new to human scale props, it was really nice to have his sort of support and backup as reference to find out how big the lasgun should be. Once I found out how tall it was, like how long it was, how wide it was, once I found out all of that information, I was able to then split the entire prop apart and scale everything accordingly and get some more detail in there. As you can see from the image here, I split everything up into their individual parts. Now as you can see, things have changed a little bit, but I have so many different variants of like the magazine or the power cell, even the power pack. I have different versions of the stock as well. In the end, I did go with there's two different versions of the power pack I did, but there's also 2 versions of the stock that I did. One without that little bump in the middle, that was just a smooth straight down, and one with that little bump in the middle, and I prefer the one with the bump in the middle. Without that there, I don't feel like I would have an exact sort of placement for my hand. I feel like I could either be too far forward or too far back, and I like that that notch is there because I can just place the edge of my hand against that when I'm posing, and it just feels right. It feels right, and it feels really secure. Now, in this image, you can see there has been a lot of progress. The progress here being the flash hider has a more distinct shape and design. I've notched the end of the barrel a little bit. I've added more details. I've added some rivets in. I've added more detail to the power pack. I've added the circle. I've added a distinct trigger. There's a lot of things on this particular version that I've added on just to sort of up my game a little bit and sort of get that next level of lasgun. So like the first one was like your basic shapes, your bare bones, your building blocks, and then you move on then to, you know, shaping it and making it more distinct and showing, you know, each individual part as it is, rather than just here are a bunch of squares and blocks like I did originally. Now here you can see all of the individual parts all split up. There are some changes I needed to do at this point. I had changed some of this from the last image you just saw, but then had to change them again. There was a lot of changing, a lot of editing, a lot of stuff to do on this particular weapon. But that being said, everything here, you can see there are like 2 of everything. There are 2 of the triggers because I wanted to double them up with some 3mm foam. I ended up using a lollipop stick and stuff instead. But like I said, you know, at this point I'm still designing it and trying to figure it out. The power packs, I changed the design from a split magazine that has that sort of diagonal line going up to just having the diagonal line inside the middle of the power pack. I then changed this back again and changed the way it went together. I actually did it in 2 layers at this point. I did a 5mm outside layers and then a 2mm skin. Again, with the side pieces and the main body parts of the gun from the actual center block of the actual main body, I had those perfectly scaled. I even test cut those from some scrap pieces I had just to see the actual sort of how big they were, like in my hands, and how well they went together. Everything was going pretty well up to this point, because after this then it was a test assembly in Lightburn with all the details added, everything changed, and even the bayonet attached. So here it is, the Lucius pattern Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, ready to go on my Lightburn software. This is the final version of it, complete with bayonet. The way the bayonet attaches I'll explain later on in the video, but I then changed that. Again, I'll explain that later. But as you can see here, I have the flash hider ready, flat and ready to cut out. I have the PVC pipes on there just as reference. I actually lengthened the lower PVC pipe where the bayonet attaches. I actually lengthened that when I actually built the gun because I wanted just a touch more wiggle room. The body, the stock and everything is all done. As you can see with the magazine, like I explained just now, there's that diagonal line. I made that a separate 2mm piece so that when I actually go to laser cut everything out, I'll cut that out of 2mm and then layer it on top of the 5mm for much greater detail. Before we move on to the final part of the laser side of things, I wanted to just shine some light on the stock. This is the shape of the stock I went for, and I really, really like the shape of it. Even now, after having it cut out and everything and holding it, it just feels right. The way I hold my Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, to me, it genuinely feels like you're holding a real gun. But to hold these parts together, I use a steel rod inside the gun. And to have that sit in there properly, I made this track. See this? I've highlighted it in pink for you, but do you see this track that runs around the inside of the stock? I do this on both the internal pieces, so I flip one so that one's upside down and one's the right way up. That way then when you put them together they're identical. I use my router then to go around and dig a 4mm trench all the way around on both sides. That way the steel rod that I use then to hold everything together, when I bend that using the anvil and my bench vise, I can put that inside the stock and have that as the main strength of the stock slash like actual main body of the gun. So here we are, the final part. Separating everything into their different foam thicknesses and then laser cutting them out. As you can see on the 10mm section there, you can see those pink tracks I made, and you can see how I flipped everything upside down. You can see the main gun bodies with those orange circles. You can see the bayonet design that I changed later on. And you can see the 2 Aquila with the blocks I made. Those have been altered previously to making the blocks. So originally I just made them perfectly square and cut them at an angle on my bandsaw. What I've done instead now is if I make another Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, I'm just going to let the laser cutter cut them out with the angles there already. Therefore, you know, reducing one step I would have to do, so I wouldn't have to use the bandsaw. I could just glue these together and they're ready to go. 5mm, you can see in the middle there are like these 2 sort of bird head pieces at the very top. Those go on the back of the bayonet handle. You can see the 5mm flash hider, you can see the 5mm lasgun ammo pack or power cell or power pack pieces, and all the other little additional laser etch details and stuff, including the strips and the circles that go on the very back of the stock. Then there, right at the very end, 2mm, the 2 side panels that go on the lasgun power packs. The details and everything you can see here, there isn't much of. The Aquila is part of the details, the sort of the small 5mm pieces for the back of the bayonet and such. They're all little pieces. They're all sort of they're going to be there regardless, because you know you have to have some sort of details. But when it comes to like the rivets and the weathering and things like that, most of that I did after building the gun. So I would use my Dremel tool with different bits, different sanding techniques, different paint techniques and such. But as for the main parts of this Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, everything you see and everything you need is here on this screen. So just taking a bit of a pause here to explain some things. In total, the Lasgun build took me 2 weeks. So from start to finish, having all the parts on the table from start to finish, that's including painting, took me 2 weeks. Now, if you add on the time it took me to design the sort of bare bones, then refine it and refine it and refine it, and then finally get it down to the final parts I needed, you're probably looking at about maybe 2.5 to 3 weeks, maybe more, if you add the light burn stuff into it as well. But if I have all the parts cut out ready to go, and I have all the half-round dowels and stuff ready, and I have absolutely everything in my workshop ready to go, including the steel bar or the aluminium bar and the PVC pipes and everything, it can take me about 2 weeks, maybe less now. I'm quite confident in saying that, maybe even less now, to build a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. I'm really, really proud to be able to say this, because the first one I ever built, I built for Frankie, Nerd Princess. She actually purchased one from me, and I used that as a sort of a gauge to be like, right, how can I make this build quicker? So I built hers nice and slowly, took my time. I think it took about 3.5 weeks, if not a touch more, to build the first Lasgun. Once I'd built hers and it was done and I sent it off to her and she started painting it and everything, I took it straight away back to the workshop and started building mine immediately, and that took me 2 weeks, bang on. I have a pretty strong feeling in my gut that I could build one in maybe just over a week and a half. Maybe even a week and a half. I'm not sure, but I do have plans to build a second lasgun. I'm really hoping I can use it at events for like photo shoots, so I'll have mine and I can like pose, and then if people want to come up and have a photo with me, they'll have a choice of holding either, you know, the trench club, or they can hold a lasgun, you know, without having the need for me to give them the gun that I'm holding. I can just keep mine and then they can grab theirs and we can pose next to each other. I thought that kind of thing I'd love to do, so, you know, we'll see. For the future, I might even do a build tutorial video for you guys on how to build a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. We shall see. But for now, on with the video and the actual building of a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. Alright, let's begin. The 4 pieces you see on the left are the main stock. The 4 pieces on the right are the main body. Above that is the Aquila block. I'll explain about that more in a second. The 4 pieces for the stock, as you can see, the middle one has a laser etched line around it. That's the line I explained about earlier. The one just below it has the same line but on the opposite side, because they go together to basically house the steel bar and the main strength of the entire gun. The pieces on the right, as I said just now, are the main body. Those pieces get put together with a large block of foam between them. This basically houses the entire Krieg Lasgun. I'll explain more shortly. Above that is the Aquila block. I call it the Aquila block because it's a large block with an Aquila both sides of it. That is what you hold with your left hand when aiming and firing the gun. This is my router. I purchased this router to do basically one job. It has done several jobs since, but when I purchased this router, it was more specifically to do this one very important job for Deathcore of Krieg Lasguns. I've used this in several props since, and honestly, it's done really, really well. Here, you will see the 2 channels I dug out of the pieces that I cut previously. Now you're probably wondering, the pieces that you saw earlier were already cut out and had laser etched lines on them, but these are all together on foam. Sadly, when I was building my Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, I didn't take those pictures. But when I built the first one for Nerd Princess, I did take those pictures. So what I've done is I've mixed and matched a bunch of images from the album I did for her Lasgun over on Battle Ready, and the album I did for my Krieg Lasgun on Iron Warrior Cosplay. So there are going to be some images that don't quite add up, but please understand that I've had to find these images from all over my sort of social media pages and my archives to be able to put together a coherent video for you guys. So using the router, I cut out those channels all the way to the very end. This basically now gives me the perfect shape to follow with the metal bending. In my personal lasgun, I used a steel rod. In this one, as you can see here, it's an aluminium rod. The aluminium rod version that you can see on screen now was for Nerd Princess's lasgun. In mine, I used a steel bar. It'll change in a moment when I switch back over to the images from my lasgun. But this is identical to what is inside my Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. But instead of an aluminium bar, which I ran out of, I used what I had left, and that was a steel bar. So with the aluminium bar bent to shape around my anvil using a hammer and a pair of pliers, because aluminium bends very easily, I was able to get this shape. And this shape is what basically gives the Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun the most of its strength. Once the metal bar has been glued in and both halves have been glued together with the bar in the middle, you can then glue the additional 2 extra stock pieces on the outside, giving you a total thickness of 40 millimeters. So you have this stock-shaped 40mm block with an aluminium bar, or in my case a steel bar, inside. What you do next is take that to your belt sander. I used my belt sander that I tilted to a 45-degree angle. I used that and slowly, on the slowest setting, sanded away the shape I wanted, giving it a nice rounded and more natural, realistic looking stock shape. So taking those perfectly square layers and sanding them down to something that looks so clean and so realistic just makes me incredibly happy. After this step, and you have your stock as it is with the bars sticking out to the front of it and it all sanded perfectly, what I did, and I advise people to do this because it works really well, with the foam that I use, you can, and pretty much any foam, you can use a blowtorch on a very low setting to sort of kiss the surface of the foam to seal it. But not only that, if you keep going and then increase the heat slowly as you go, the foam will start to melt and become a bit solid on the surface. I've done that and it almost feels like rubber now. It's so strong. It feels denser now that I've sort of melted the surfaces together. With that being said, please be careful. Wear a respirator, do it outside or in a well-ventilated area. Foam, sort of the toxins that get released from foam when you burn it are incredibly bad for your lungs. So please be aware that when using a blowtorch or even a heat gun to seal foam, you should wear a respirator or a mask of sorts. So with the stock complete, you can now move on to adding the bump stock pads to it. On the back of a Krieg Lasgun stock, there are 4 blocks that are sort of rounded and shaped. They go against your shoulder. Now, I have here in my hand 4 blocks of high density EVA foam. These are 30mm, I believe, thickness. These are the same density foam that I use in the platforms in my Iron Warrior Space Marine. Now, using these 4 blocks, I made a template out of paper and made sure that I placed it and marked it on the stock to make sure I had plenty of room for 4 of them. I had to adjust the paper pattern a little bit to make sure I can get all 4 on. Once I did that, I actually dremeled them down very roughly using my Dremel, so you can see some of the Dremel lines and stuff on it. But once they were all dremeled down, I sort of test fit them onto the back of the stock, and then once I was done there, I took a brand new sanding sponge and sanded them all down so that they were basically just seamless and perfect, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. So what I did then was I took the same technique I used with the stock, and I poked a little metal spike into the back of each of them and used a heat gun to, like, on the most powerful setting, to pretty much burn and melt the surface so that they were pretty much almost solid. These were then glued onto the back of the stock and are going to basically be taking the brunt of the entire gun, because I put the gun down on these blocks. So once I'm done with the Lasgun, I want to put it down, or I'm displaying it, if I want to lean it against a wall or something, I will put it down on these 4 blocks. Now, these 4 blocks are, as I said, high density EVA foam, so they can take the brunt of it. I've had no issues with them since. They are absolutely fantastic. So if you're going to use pieces of foam for the stock of your gun to put against your shoulder, or even put the gun down on, I suggest trying to find the densest foam you can. So moving on to the next part, in my hand here, I'm holding what I like to call the Aquila block. Now, the Aquila block is 60mm of foam, so it's 6 10mm pieces, glued together. The 2 outer ones I used my laser cutter to etch an Aquila into. Basically, when I saw the edge of it and I thought, oh, it's so plain and there's nothing there, I wanted something to sort of stand out. So I thought, well, what better than an Aquila. I did either think of an Aquila or I was going to put a Krieg logo on there, like a Krieg gas mask, but I thought no, they would have an Aquila. So what I did was I glued these together, and like I said before, I wasn't very happy with them just being perfectly square. So what I did was I used my square and I marked some lines, and then I finally, in the end, did an angled cut on each corner using my bandsaw as the block as a whole. So after I glued, I used the bandsaw and cut all the edges. I am so happy with how that looks. I liked it so much that I actually went back to Lightburn and adjusted the files to have the angles on it as you saw previously. So now if I make another Krieg Lasgun, I will have these angles in already. So that'll take a step out for me. After laser cutting them, I won't have to use my bandsaw. I can just take this and sort of just glue them together, and that'll be that. So with those pieces done, the stock, the 4 pieces of foam on the very back of the stock, the Aquila block itself, it was about time then to get started on the main body. Now, in this image here, what I like to refer to as the main body is that circular piece where the magazine or the power cell or the power pack goes into, and then the upper piece then, which basically houses the barrel. Using the steel rod that protrudes from the stock, I basically filled the white barrel, the top barrel that you see there, the main barrel. I filled that barrel with circles of EVA foam that I cut out using the same size PVC pipe. I glued them together and then popped them in. Using a very long drill bit, I drilled through them all and glued the barrel to that piece of steel bar. Now, inside the main body, as I mentioned before, are large blocks of foam to not only add support for the main body, for those pieces to be able to be glued onto both sides, but also to support the back of the barrel. Now, the front support of the barrel will come later, but the rear of the barrel definitely needs supporting, considering that the middle of the gun is where the most stress is going to be when the gun is put down on the ground, or when I'm picking it up or holding it or slinging it over my shoulder. The middle of the gun is going to get a lot of strain and twisting, so I wanted to make sure that it was absolutely as strong as possible. The main barrel that goes into the block, as you can see here, there's a small piece of the block sticking out the bottom there. I have cut the block to the same shape as that top piece. That way the barrel has enough sort of bite and enough purchase that you could pick up this lasgun now that it's complete by the barrel. You can pick it up by the barrel and swing it around, no problem whatsoever. You don't want to, because it just looks stupid if you do, but you could if you wanted to. And you know, if I want to just pick it up super quickly, I can pick it up by the barrel. I normally pick it up by the very front of the barrel sometimes if I'm like reaching for it from inside the van or something. But honestly, try to make your props as strong as possible. That's what I try and do. I've always tried to make props as strong as I could. When the pieces go on, you always have to make sure that you dry fit them first. So here you can see I am just test fitting the pieces on the side using pins. I can't use pins on the PVC pipe obviously, but I'm using them on the side there. And then I also wanted to put the Aquila block in there and make sure that it lines up with just the very bottom edge of that top main body piece. Looking at this now, you think, how is he going to attach that Aquila block? Well, that comes a little bit later. With the gun basically glued together at this point, because I remember this exact photo, the gun is now pretty much glued together, and that main barrel and the main body, including the stock, is all contact cemented into each other and is basically now one solid piece. This is now an interesting segment with the Aquila block. Now, this might look a bit strange to some of you, but the Aquila block in the middle there, as you all know, is 60mm of foam. What I did was I took that small PVC pipe, the lower PVC pipe that holds the bayonet and such, I took that over to my Dremel, and I dremeled the end of it, not the end that goes away from the Aquila block, but the end that goes into the Aquila block. I dremeled the end of that so that it was sharp. I then measured across the 60mm width, halved it, and then halved that, and basically kept doing that around in a circle and found dead center. I then measured the tip of the PVC pipe and then found exact center. I then slowly started to use the PVC pipe to cut a hole into the Aquila block. Not too far in, I think it goes from where it starts at the Aquila block into the second head of the Aquila, the one that's facing away to the right. So I made sure that there was plenty of purchase in there. Once that's done, I took that out and then permanently contact cemented that into its home. So that became one solid piece after it had dried. But obviously, you can't glue a flat surface to a round surface without doing something, fancy like rounding it off or anything. I didn't fancy rounding it off. What I fancied doing instead was in the back, as you can see on the right side of the Aquila block, I have this aluminium bar that sticks out. I contact cemented that in dead center. I drilled a hole, forced it in, contact cemented it, even hot glued the very end of it, and then once I did that, the foam blocks that are inside the actual main body, as I explained, of the lasgun, that then gets drilled and contact cemented in. Then the Aquila block gets contact cemented to just the underside of the barrel and the back of the main body. That gives it so much strength you have no idea. Originally, I was worried about it coming away from the gun, until when I realized the amount of gluing that I could do around the rear of the Aquila block into and onto the main body. Trust me, that thing ain't going anywhere. With pretty much the main gun put together, so the stock, the main body, the Aquila block, the barrels, with the gun pretty much put together, I thought it was then time to start work on the details. Using these 10mm half-round dowels, I cut them all to the exact length I needed, using my fabric tape measure to measure around the barrel. I cut these and then contact cemented the entire underside of all of them, and then using contact cement on the barrels with the markings that I had done, I then glued them on. So here you can see where I've marked a line and an X. I used a ruler for this, and I marked and crossed exactly where I needed to actually glue one of these. Now, I'm gluing them very slowly. Don't try to glue them all at once. Glue them one at a time, one half at a time. Then flip the gun over and then glue the other side. It is much easier, and thankfully, because they're 10mm foam half-round dowels, if you are just a touch short, you can just pull it a little bit. Don't pull it too much, it will just tear or snap with you. But if you pull it just a little bit while you're gluing it down, you'll be fine. There's a little bit of give and a little bit of play with EVA foam, and that's why I absolutely love it. But with these all glued on, that's the heatsink part of the lasgun complete. I'll show you guys more of that in the halfway point image, as I like to call it. With the majority of the main body and back end of the gun put together, everything's quite strong at that end, but when both the barrels are sticking out and they go to the very end, they're quite weak at the other end of the gun. So at the firing end of the gun, the best thing to do then is to add the support. Now on our Krieg Lasgun, there is a barrel support that goes at the front of the gun. So all I did was I took some foam, cut out a rough shape that I liked. I then thinned this down later on, but I made a rough shape, drew some lines to where the barrels were going to be. I took the two scrap pieces I had of the main barrel and the lower barrel from that I'd cut off previously, sharpened them with my Dremel, and cut out the holes. I then added these on, and just after sort of pushing these on and getting them lined up the way I wanted them, I added on the iron sight and superglued that on, and then pulled the foam out a little bit and then superglued these pieces onto the PVC barrel. So with the gun supported all the way from front to back, you get sort of this quite cool looking sort of look down the entire gun. You can see the iron sight on the very end there. When you actually pick the gun up and hold it against your shoulder, you can actually look down the iron sights, and it's actually pretty damn straight. You know, obviously it's not a real gun, but it's kind of a cool little thing that no one else gets to see. You know, only I get to see it when I'm holding the gun and actually aiming it. It's quite nice. So with the stock, the supports, the main body, the barrels, the heat sinks, the Aquila block, and some small details like the round discs on the front and on the bottom right of the actual main body, the Krieg Lasgun is slowly coming together. The barrels are all supported, the gun can now support its own weight, so you can pick up the gun and use it as a sort of, you know, to test how things are feeling, how things are looking. I personally really enjoy, you know, picking the gun up every time and testing it, making sure it was straight, and having to use the heat gun a little bit here and there just to sort of straighten things out as I go. It's pretty satisfying, and it's satisfying enough that you just want to take a picture. And as you can see here, I took a picture of me holding the Krieg Lasgun. By now you can see I added that small detail piece at the very, very top of the gun there with a little circle on it. That's just like there's two small pieces side by side, and then a thin 5mm angled piece of 5mm in the middle. And you can look down between that all the way down to the iron sights. And I'm genuinely really proud of how this gun looks, as you can tell from the very happy look on my face. Moving on to the next bit of detail on the Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun, here we have the power pack or magazine, or whatever you personally call it. I call it a power pack if I can. Sometimes I stumble and I'll call it something else. But this is the Deathcore of Krieg power pack for the Lasgun. As you can see, I cut out the 5mm pieces. So the 5mm pieces are two of the piece that's in the middle, the main body. Then the two secondary pieces with the slits cut out of them are from 2mm, and they are the covers that go over the top. I then build the entire centerpiece out of 5mm foam, and then inside I've stacked a bunch of 10mm foam to give it a bit of strength and support inside. So once this has been completely put together, you can actually install this into the gun. Now, the thing I do personally, as you can see in this image, is I'm trying to make it so that when I'm gluing the power pack in, the stock has to be touching the very back, the stock has to be touching the table, and the gun has to be as straight as possible. Now this image is taken at an angle, but I can assure you the gun is absolutely straight. It can even, if you move the stock off the table, I've even made it so that the gun can support its entire weight and length just on the Lasgun power pack. So that's genuinely something I take pride in. I know it's not a lot, but when you're doing something and you aim to have it so that it can do that and it does work, it gives you that little bit of pride. Now, at the very end of the Lasgun, I didn't want it to have just an empty barrel. I wanted it to look like an actual Lasgun end. So what I did was I cut a piece of 10mm foam, and then again using the same pieces of PVC pipe to cut out the foam, and then using the same size PVC pipe that I used for the barrel that goes underneath the main barrel, I made this. This basically gives you a little added detail that goes into the barrel to show that there is actually something in there rather than just a big empty tube, and I think it looks absolutely awesome. I think the decision that I didn't make originally was I didn't put anything in the very end of the barrel. I have since then done that, and I've painted it red, and I think it looks really, really good. I'm genuinely really proud of this Lasgun. I don't know if you can tell. But moving on, we have the actual flash hider. Now this thing took some designing, because trying to figure out the shape first of all from these 2D images, and then getting a 3D model and messing around with the 3D models and stuff, still trying to figure out how to get this piece to act flat. So I needed to find out how to cut it properly, how to get it to lay flat. I need to also make sure that it could fit around the barrel. This one here is the completed one, but I'm going to tell you right now a bit of insider info. There was like 3 other attempts. There was 3 other attempts of this that didn't quite work properly. But on this attempt here, on this final attempt here, I have the perfect flash hider. And as you can see from these images here, it fits over the barrel perfectly and looks and plays the absolute ideal part for the Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. Now, in the background there of this image, you can see there is a 3D model of a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. That's one you can actually flip around and have a look at, and I absolutely love the way that one looks. That one was a big help in the building process of this Lasgun. But this flash hider, I cannot tell you how happy I am with it and how decent it looks on the Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun. So with the Lasgun entirely put together, the details and stuff added on, all the little rivets and stuff put into it, and everything sorted and in its place, the next step is sealing, priming and painting. Back when I first started using the workshop, as you can see, I was limited to basically this one table. Now, I did used to stream from this table. I still do now, but it's orientated and moved into a completely different part of the workshop. The Lasgun you see here is the very same Lasgun I've been working on. This was my one. This has been completely covered in Thompson's Tenure Roof Sealer. I personally use Thompson's Tenure Roof Sealer because it is a rubber-based paint that you would put onto your roof, like flat roofs or those fabric roofs. You know, you get those tar sheet roofs. You can use this on it, and when it dries, it turns to rubber. The best thing about it as well is once it's dried and turned to rubber, you can paint over it with acrylics and spray paints. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, in terms of sanding, you can sand a little bit on it, a little bit gently on it, but if you sand too hard, you'll get holes in the rubber. So when you do that, it is almost impossible to hide that hole. So you have to be very careful. Try and get everything sanded and done before you seal with Thompson's Tenure Roof Sealer. If you seal it with all roof sealer and everything and you find a piece you need to sand down, I think it would be best if you just left it, because roof sealer is such a difficult thing to work with. I have managed to fix 2 small holes that I've done in the past, but it is increasingly difficult and very time consuming. But as you can see here, the Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun got completely sealed in Thompson's Tenure Roof Sealer, and here it is hanging in the workshop with dust covers everywhere because I was spraying in the workshop, a complete coat of just straight up matte black spray paint. With the matte black spray paint completely dried, this is what my Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun looked like. Now, it doesn't look like much because it is just an entirely black silhouette currently, but you can see there is the entire Lasgun and my original Mark I bayonet. You can see the bayonet attaches at the back. I will explain that bayonet sort of process a little bit later on, but as of right now, I'm just showing you guys what the Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun looked like. This is the day after I had sprayed it, so it was completely dry. I brought it outside the workshop. I wanted to take some pictures of it, and genuinely can't tell you how happy I was with the sort of the feel of it and the weight of it, and the fact that you can hold the stock right at the very end of the gun, and the entire gun is so structurally sound that the whole thing will support itself. It makes me incredibly happy. Now, the bayonet. This, as you can see on my Lightburn software, is my Mark I bayonet. Now, the Mark I bayonet is the wrong shape for a Deathcore of Krieg, but also the way I made it so that it could attach to the gun is also not quite how bayonets attach to guns. So this basically is just to show you what I did originally. So there's the original file, and this is how I decided to go for it. I took this 10mm piece of, like, I think it's balsa, I'm not sure what kind of wood it is, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't make it out of like hardwood or anything. So this piece here, as you can see, it's 23 inches long, and it's you know, it's pretty decent for what it is. And my plan was to line up the bayonet with the top and bottom of it, glue those on with contact cement, and then sand them down. So if you look at this image here, you can see I did exactly that. I did mess up a little bit in the middle when I was sanding it with the belt sander, because I accidentally took it to the edge while I was sanding the front of it. I took it too far back where the belt goes around, and I accidentally took a bit too much material out of the middle. But this was the Mark 1 bayonet, like I said, this was the Mark 1 bayonet, so it's not a problem. But you can see here where I put the handle on, I cut the end of the handle off, and I used my belt sander to sand the flat piece of wood a little bit thinner than what I would normally have, and then I added 2 pieces of 10mm foam both sides, and I dremeled that round-ish so that it was bigger than the PVC pipe. You'll see why in a second. This is the very same bayonet that you just saw now, but like I said, it was pretty much done when it was on the table, so I gave it a quick Dremel and a little bit of buffing with my sanding sponge, and then put it in the vise on the other side of the workshop and covered it in Thompson's 10-year roof sealer. This actual shot was taken the same day I sprayed the entire Lasgun black. So I let this dry and sprayed this black, and then let the Lasgun and this dry overnight. I then attached this to the front of the gun after adding that small piece of 10mm for the little handguard on the bayonet. Continuing on with the bayonet, this is the bayonet on my new metal workbench back when I got it. I painted it up with some browns and some silvers, and then I did a wash all over it. As you can see, it's a very basic paint job. I then, shortly after taking this photo, dremeled a piece of 10mm foam and cut it in half, and then glued both the pieces over the very back end of the bayonet, so that I could have a very small handguard that would fit between the, not the teeth, but between the gap on the very back of the flash hider. Well, actually, if you look at this image here, you can see that little piece of foam that I dremeled that fits perfectly in between that gap. I just did that as a sort of detail piece to make it kind of look good. Now, back when I did this, don't get me wrong, back when I did this originally, I loved it. I thought this was fantastic. I thought I was a clever fucker to figure it out that I could put this in the end of the barrel and then turn it so that that can face there. Because to get it in and out, you didn't just pull it in and out, you had to turn it 180 degrees. Or turn it a little bit away from where that gap in the back of the flash hider is, and then pull it out. I thought that was quite cool. I thought I was like really clever like that. It was quite interesting and quite fun, but in the end I decided to make the Mark II bayonet that was more realistic in terms of how it attached, and wanted to make sure that the handle looked much better. So after this image was taken, I did take it to a few cons. I did use the bayonet. I didn't have it in too many photos, but I actually, believe it or not, can't find any photos of me at a con with the Lasgun and the bayonet in it. This was obviously way before my Krieg, but I did take the Lasgun to cons to show off and put the bayonet in it. But this is before the Krieg cosplay, and yeah, anyway, I decided to go ahead and tear the handle off, tear the guard off, and make this basically like a long knife, a long Krieg knife. So as you can see here, this is the exact same knife. I laser cut and painted a new handle for it. I weathered it up a little bit more, and as you can see there, I have a beveled top and bottom and a beveled left and right little handguard piece I think this looks absolutely fantastic. I haven't taken this to a con yet, I should, but I really, really like how it looks, especially the handle. The handle I painted up to try and look like wood as best as I could, and I'm genuinely really, really pleased with how it looks. I'm over the moon, in fact. But with this being done, I didn't want to just throw it away. Because it was my first Krieg bayonet, I wanted it to stick around, but as something a little bit different. So I'm really happy it's still around. I'm really happy it is just hanging around, and it is what it is. But with the new type of bayonet, I decided to go for the underslung sort of style bayonet, and this is what I came up with. So here, as you can see, I went with wood again, but this time I went with hardwood, and I did some joinery. So here you can see the bayonet is tapered at the front, and then it goes to a very nice even point. Then where it attaches to the gun is where I did the joinery. I took a piece of square hardwood, cut it down to the size I needed, cut out a notch using my bandsaw, and then made sure that it pressure fit into the actual grooves that I had made on the very back of the bayonet. Now, the middle of the bayonet. And in the middle of the bayonet is where I cut away with a chisel and my craft knife and just sort of shaved away a bit of foam so that it would fit snugly, and then used wood glue and some very small tacks to hold it together, little tin tacks that go all the way through. I then coated the rear of the handle in 2 pieces of 5mm, one both sides, and then I took it to my bandsaw and I cut that little curve in the handle in the very back there. I think that looks absolutely fantastic. Then take the whole thing over to my belt sander and give it one quick sand down. I made sure that there was an edge on the blade, both top and bottom, and that currently is what my Deathcore of Krieg bayonet looks like. I think it looks much nicer. Yes, it looks a bit chunkier, but honestly, just looking at it in this image of the gun vertical with the bayonet in it, it's just so much stronger. Now, the piece that goes into that lower barrel, exactly the same as the old one. This time, I took a piece of hardwood, dremeled it sort of semi-round-ish. I took off the edges. I put 5mm foam both sides, but this time at the very front of it, I put 2 layers of electrical tape to thicken it up. So when it goes in, you then push it in a little bit harder and it locks it in place. This bayonet locks into place in that lower barrel so strong that you can grab the entire gun off the ground by just the bayonet itself. That's how strong that connection is. Very, very happy with that. So not long after, I cut a piece of the rear of the handle off and re-laser cut these 2 really nice detail pieces that I had in the original file but never cut them out because I decided to not use them. When I saw that file again, I decided I'm going to cut these out and I'm going to glue them on. So I'll cut a piece of the foam off the back and put them on. So as you can see on the handle of the bayonet there are these 2 ornate metal pieces. They're actually just pieces of foam, but they're these 2 metal ornate pieces before the 2 studs. I added those on, and when I painted this up to match the gun, I knew that this Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun was just the best thing I had built in terms of human scale, because you need to understand, this Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun was the first type of human scale item I'd built. Yes, I'd built one for Nerd Princess, but the work that had gone into building that one and then transferring what I had skill-wise from that to this one made me even happier. So to have this in my collection and now have a full cosplay for it is just the best thing. Anyway, enough about bayonets. Back to the Krieg Lasgun. It's been sealed and primed in black, ready for paint. The next step was I masked off some essential areas and sprayed what I needed in lead belcher. Now, I did use a Games Workshop paint for this originally because I had some left over from my Reaver Titan that I'd sprayed, so I thought why not use what's left of this because I have nothing else to paint in terms of GW models or anything. So I used lead belcher to paint most of the metal parts of the gun, so the entire barrel, the main body, and things like that. I then took to painting the Aquila. Now, with the Aquila, I wanted it to look like something special. I wanted it to look really nice, so I took my time with it. I did a lot of dry brushing and a lot of different motions. I looked up a lot of techniques and stuff. And what I decided to go for in the end was a gradient, going from darker to brighter to then a silver Aquila. So you can see it's all dark browns around the edges, going into lighter browns and going into a very light brown to almost like an orangey yellow brown. And I really, really like that look, including the silver Aquila. As you can see, both left and right on the very top corners there, I used my Dremel tool with a special bit on the end of it, and that gives me these really nice looking rivets on the sides of the Aquila block there. Now moving on, man alive was this a tedious job. I cut strips of masking tape and masked off the entire barrel. I even masked between each one of these 10mm half round dowels so that I could spray them all black. Now I wanted to make sure they were absolutely jet black because that's the colour I was going for. I just wanted them completely jet black and wanted the heat sinks to look like they have been cooked, you know, from the amount of power going through this lasgun when it's being used. So they were absolutely jet black. I gave them 2 coats altogether and let them dry between the coats. Once that was done, I removed the masking tape, and man alive did it look good. Looking at this image here, you can see there's the Aquila. The Aquila has been painted in a bright silver. I painted the eject button for the power pack in red. I have no weathering on this whatsoever, so I didn't do a wash over it or anything. I didn't do any grim darkness to it at all until right at the very end. So here you can see I've painted the stock as best as I could, and I've repainted the silver on the very back of the gun. So instead of a lead belcher silver, I went with a much brighter sterling silver. And then right at the very back, those 4 bumper shoulder stocks pieces, the little blocks I made, those are now just jet black. I just painted those absolutely jet black. I'm over the moon with how this gun looked. Only downside to it though, far too clean. The gun needed some heavy weathering. Well, that's where this is probably my favorite image from like way back when. I think I built this gun in 2020 or 2019. I'm not quite sure, but this is where things went from like, that's a really nice lasgun to this is a grim dark lasgun. Like, this is very grim dark. I took like 4 or 5 lots of washes and weathering to this. I used spray cans, I used inks, I even used a mixture of burnt sienna, burnt umber, and Mars black mixed together in just the smallest amount of water, and I washed it all over it. And then instead of dabbing it off with a piece of blue roll or a piece of tissue like I normally do, I took a sponge roller and I rolled it all over the gun. So you can see some parts are much darker now compared to what they used to in that other image. They used to look much brighter, but I wanted them to be all quite dark. Another addition I added to it is right at the very end of the gun, as you can see there, is this little red piece. What I did was I used a lollipop stick, 2 pieces of 5mm foam, and a 10mm foam disc. What I made was a plug for the end of that barrel. And that little plug basically is when I'm not using the bayonet, that goes in. When I'm ready to use the bayonet, I pull that out and I put the bayonet in. Speaking of bayonets, I know we'd finished talking about them, but now we're talking about the bayonet in the lasgun fully painted. There it is, the fully painted lasgun and the fully painted bayonet together. I genuinely do like how this lasgun looks. Blowing my own trumpet a little bit here, I know, but it is just a thing of beauty. I was over the moon when I put it on that bench and I realized that I can move it back and have it just resting on the power pack, and genuinely, you have no idea how happy it makes me that it just balances perfectly. Put the bayonet in that you know, the under barrel, you put the bayonet into that, the whole thing topples over because the balance just doesn't quite work. But that steel rod in the back of the gun just provides that perfect balance between almost tipping over, but, you know, being weighted enough at the front with the 2 PVC pipes that it will hold its own weight. The lasgun was complete. I took it to a fair few events where I had a table when I was wearing the Iron Warrior, but eventually, as many of you know, quite recently, I completed my Deathcore of Krieg cosplay. Well, this lasgun was intended for that cosplay, I just never knew when I was going to actually make that cosplay. The whole point of making this lasgun was because I'd already designed the original lasgun, but when Frankie asked me to build her one, and I got into the groove of making, like, lasguns, I was just like, holy shit, I need to make myself a lasgun. So that's where this was basically born from, was I'm here, I've got all the stuff to do it, I've got enough material that I can make 2 of them, I might as well just carry on and make 2 of them. So I had intentions of making one for myself, but when I told Frankie the second one can be yours, I'll keep the first one, she very much intended on keeping the first one. And that was absolutely not a problem. She was more than happy to receive it, but the paint job she did on hers is absolutely incredible. I have asked her that if she ever pops down to Wales, she has to pop over and paint mine like that, because wow, the paint job on it is incredible. In July of 2021, I actually saw a really cool image of a Deathcore of Krieg Lasgun where the metalwork on it looked almost like galvanized metal. It was really, really nice looking, and it also had this skull on the back of it with some really nice ornate detail around it. What I did instead was I did just a circle around it. I tore the old circle off, sanded it down, laser cut this beautiful little circle, and then cast myself 2 golden skulls. I cast them in hot glue and then sprayed them gold. Then I hot glued them onto the sides, and then to get the galvanized effect, I used sterling silver with some white in it, and the paintbrush I used was like a mop brush, and I just held it at the very end of the brush and just sort of dabbed it on, and I let that paint dry quite thick. So that's how I got that effect. As you can see, from the time of me using the lasgun at different events and stuff, you can see where the coils at the top have started to come through with a bit of silver from the original lead belcher. That's because the spray paint has started to wear away a little bit. And then the Aquila on the side, as you can see there, that started to wear away a little bit as well from me holding it with my hand all the time. But with this little upgrade, I can't tell you like how much time I've put into the lasgun and then not wanted to change it, but then finally just bit the bullet and changed it. This little change here was pretty much all worth it, because the skulls on the side, the gold with the silver and brown, just make it pop, you know? There's just something about it. So with that being said, when I was on stream, this was back when I first started streaming, I took the lasgun, showed it off on stream, and I was like, what do you guys think? And I decided on stream that night I was going to paint the Aquilas again in silver. So I spent an entire stream painting both the Aquilas, and they do take a bit of time, they do take a fair bit of time to paint. But instead, I decided, instead of painting them a solid silver all the way through, I would dry brush silver, but only in certain places. I haven't actually got a full photo of that right now, but what I can do is show you the photo that I showed you earlier at the very beginning of the video. This is my Deathcore of Krieg lasgun completed. Now, since the very last photo that you just saw of it on my workbench, I have added 2 metal loops, one to the front and one to the back. That is for the shoulder strap. I've also repainted the Aquilas now, and all of the rivets that I've added, because the rivets weren't on the previous image, they were little golden dots that I added on, but what kept happening is they kept tearing off at events. So what I would do instead is tear them all off, sand them down a little bit, and I dremeled them all in and then painted them silver. So with that, I painted the Aquila, I painted all of the little rivets, I added the 2 rings. Then this exact image here was the night I finished it. On my stream on Twitch, I replaced the flash hider, which was absolutely wrecked. It was so wrecked. I peeled it off on stream, sanded the barrel down. I laser cut a brand new one, but instead of cutting it out of the same foam that I used originally, I decided to laser cut it out of a much denser, quite a bit more rigid, but not as rigid as when you like warm it up. So I did that on stream, put it on, and I tell you what, the new flash hider for the end of the lasgun is so solid. It just makes me feel like this lasgun is going to last so much longer. The only issue I have now is I don't have a picture of it with the new bayonet on, laying on its side or in front of the workshop. The only image I have is by a very good friend of mine, Captain Ceramics. He took a photo of me at MCM London when I took the Deathcore of Krieg out. You can see there the bayonet is actually attached, but it's behind my gas mask. But you can see it enough there. You can see it's quite nice there. But I took that out to MCM London, and man alive, did people love the Deathcore of Krieg. It scared the crap out of a bunch of people. But meeting other Krieg and stuff there as well was just absolutely fantastic. So there we have it, Krieg Lasgun 101. I'm actually over the moon with how this video went. I understand that, there wasn't a boatload of detail in this, but I have given away a lot of the techniques that I've created. For example, doing the aluminium or steel rod inside the stock and following the shape. I actually didn't find that anywhere. That idea came to me after watching a video about armature wire on YouTube, and how you can sort of put that inside wings and stuff. And I thought, well, if you could put armature wire inside strings or inside like Doc Ock arms and stuff, what's stopping me from putting like a steel rod inside a stock to sort of keep its shape, and not only that, but supply the strength it needs. But anyway, there's a lot of techniques in this video that I found online. There's a lot of techniques that I sort of made up myself, and I'm really happy with how the lasgun has come out. I fully intend on making another one. It'll be my third. Frankie owns the first one. This is the second one, and I absolutely fully intend on making a third one. Technically, you could say I've made 4, but not Lucius pattern ones, because I made a Gaunt's Ghost one not long ago. So I've made 2 Krieg ones and 1 Gaunt's Ghost lasgun. So it is quite interesting. But what I will do next is I will continue the 101 series. They're going to be sort of far apart from each other because they do take a lot of work. I do stay up very late into the morning to make sure I have complete and utter silence when I'm doing these sort of videos. But what I might do next is I might do a bunch of shorter videos, or I might actually do a few actual full-on tutorial videos. What I'd like from you guys is some input. If you guys want to come over to my Facebook page and message me on my Instagram, even comment on this video here on YouTube. If you could tell me, what would you like to see? Would you like to see a tutorial on how to make the respirator box? Would you like to see a tutorial on how to make the shoulder guards or something? You let me know. If there's anything you guys need, give me a shout and I will see what I can do. But from me, Iron Warrior Cosplay, and my Deathcore of Krieg cosplay, this has been Lasgun 101. I really hope it's been worth your time. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you all again in the next one. Bye for now.